Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Guardians. I am your host, Jeff Ellis, along with my co-host, Justin Latta. We are going to get into playoff hitters today after our focus on the pitching. We're going to talk about the game today. We also know who the Guardians are facing in the postseason, all on today's episode of Locked On Guardians. And before we get into it, I want to take a moment and say today's show of Locked On Guardians is sponsored by Simply Safe Home Security with fast protection technology exclusively from Simply Safe. 24/7 monitoring agents capture evidence to accurately verify a threat for faster police presence. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Visit simplysafe.com/lockedonmlb to learn more. Hey, Justin, it feels like I don't know if I want to say a hot button day. We've definitely seen some scorching hot takes today, but before we get into all of those takes, how are you feeling? You were at today's game, right?
Yeah, I was up there. It was a friends and family type game. There was a decent crowd actually, but yeah, it's been quite the day for two games before the season, the penultimate game. It's certainly been a interesting day.
Now, so I want everyone to know, yes, there is a freeze in there. You don't have to tell me in the comments. It happens sometimes. Technology isn't our friend. Justin can still talk, so we'll just address that right now. If you're watching, yes, I know the screen is frozen. Well,
I'm here.
Before we get into the game, should we just talk about, we know the Guardians are going to face the Rays in the dual ridiculous things that happened to get that to occur, that official, because you're the one who pointed out both events to me, between the weather and the catcher. Why don't I let you lead with those? Because I think it's maybe one of the weirdest ways I've ever heard to clinch positioning.
Yeah, that was really a bizarre sequence of events, actually. I had just gotten home and the Mariners went to the 10th inning. So the Mariners on Tuesday had a doubleheader with the Tigers. Game one went to the 10th inning, and the Mariners put in a catcher, Luis Torrens, to go in the 10th inning. He gives up a run, somehow gets out of it, and then the Tigers bring in their closer up 6-5. Well, doesn't get an out. Mariners win 7-6. Their magic number goes down to 1, and then a few minutes later, Tampa Bay, who was losing to the Red Sox 6-0 in a rain delay, they called that game official, and that was it. So the Mariners won with the catcher on the mound, and the Rays lost the rain-shortened game, and that clinched Tampa Bay coming to Cleveland within a matter of a half hour of each other, not even 20 minutes. It was a very weird sequence of events.
It is, and that Rays team is a great team, and I'd be a lot more scared of them. If they'd set up their pitching better, which we talked about in yesterday's show. You can go check out yesterday's show to hear why I think the Rays kind of fumbled that. But also, if this team was healthy, this is a beat up Rays team that has definitely stumbled massively down the stretch. This was not something we discussed, which, I'm sure people are like, this comes up a lot. You're a bad co-host, Jeff. And I'm like, I'll own it. But of these three wildcard teams, Tampa, Seattle, and Toronto, is there one you'd rather face more than the others? I kind of feel like they're all kind of even. If I'm being 100% honest, I don't feel like there's any that I would desperately want to avoid, or any that I feel like are massively weaker. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, they all present their own unique challenges. I did a lot of digging into it today. Actually, I've got an article coming out tomorrow that I was hoping would be the Rays, so I could run the article. Otherwise, I wasted a lot of time doing it for nothing. But yeah, Toronto has a lot of good bats. They've got some decent pitching, and the Mariners starting pitching, as we've seen, is really good. The Rays have good starting pitching too. They got two lefties that, Cleveland hasn't had a great season against left-handed pitchers. They've got a deep bullpen. Their offense isn't great. Like you said, they're banged up, and their defense, out of the three, their defense is the worst. And I think that matters when you're talking about Cleveland, because how much they put the ball in play. So defense comes into the picture when you're talking about matchups. So I guess if anybody, it was definitely the Rays. They're not playing well right now either. So, it also matters how everybody's going into the postseason too.
Yeah, it's even like, one of their best hitters is Yandy Diaz. Like, if you just look at runs created plus, he leads the team at a 148. Wouldn't he look nice in Cleveland's lineup? But more to the point, it's like he's been hurt. He barely played in that series against Cleveland. He's just barely working his way back in. They still have Randy A. Wander is back and healthy, and Paredes has been, this is, people get mad when I pat myself on the back. You can go back and find that tweet where I'm like, there is a non-zero chance that he has a better season than Meadows, and that certainly is the case. Just because he's had a strong season in general. We don't even need to get into the Meadows of it. But after that, I mean, this is such a beat up team that in some respects, it's almost like last year's Guardians, where not just because they have half of last year's Guardians on their roster, Harold Ramirez and the like, but just it's the lineup might be the least intimidating of all three for the postseason, right? Just based in its current state.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the teams there was a big article yesterday in SI by Tom Verducci about home runs and how Cleveland is historic, making the playoffs, hitting the least amount of home runs besides Detroit. Tampa Bay only has 11 more home runs than Cleveland, so they don't hit a lot of home runs either. They only managed 2 hits tonight off of Nate Eovaldi. I don't know if that really means anything, but their offenses are a lot more similar, I guess, in terms of how they create runs. So and like you said, Yandy Diaz makes a big difference in that lineup. The rest of the lineup, it lacks a lot of punch. They can do a lot of strange things, I suppose, the way Cleveland does. They don't strike out. They take walks. They kind of run well. They're a very evenly matched couple of teams, I would say.
Let's throw some random trivia at you completely again, being a bad co-host. Guess how many players have double-digit home runs on Tampa? I don't know if you looked this up and know this, but guess how many guys have 10 or more home runs for the Tampa Bay Rays?
10 or more?
Yes.
It's
a relatively low bar, I feel.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna go 5.
The
6. Are we counting? Are we counting Brandon Lau, who is out for the season?
Yes.
Anybody?
Yes, it's anyone who's played this year.
Let's say 6 then.
3. And Ji-Man Choi has sorry, everyone. I'm getting away from the mic here for a second. My voice. Randy A's got 20. Paredes has 20. Ji-Man Choi's got 10. Then you have Yandy Diaz with 9. Brendan Lau and Taylor Walls at 8. Christian Betancourt and Kevin Kiermaier at 7. So yeah, that's the lineup. Like we get it. Cleveland on the other side, I think is maybe Cleveland's got 5 with double digits. I mean, for as much as I sit back and say Amed Rosario doesn't have any power, he would have the 3rd most home runs on the Rays. He is tied for. So I mean, Cleveland's got 5 with double digit home runs. So it's not like they're lapping the field, but it's almost double. If Franmil had just hit one more when he was here, he would be up there. But they have definitely a lot of guys who have hit like a few, and that's why they have more. But yeah, just 3. And I think that's one of those things that, so another fun fact, just because I was researching this before the game, I thought for sure that Jose's double with the way the camera moved was going to go out and be the 30th home run for him this year. If he doesn't hit a home run tomorrow, it's going to be the first time since 2015 this team hasn't hit 30 home runs, not counting the COVID year, because let's be honest, COVID year doesn't count, which is interesting because if you're a deep enough fan, from 2009 to 2016 being the year where they did have a 30 home run hitter, and 2008 being they didn't have one in there. It was like such a bugaboo. And then Santana and Napoli being a right-handed hitter with 30 home runs was even longer. I feel like you had to go back even further. I can't remember that. So it's just to get into the home run side of things in the early going. Some fun facts on both parts with Cleveland's lack of home runs. But yeah, again, as much as people want to be like Cleveland doesn't hit home runs, 10 is good enough for 3rd. I just want to state that again, because that is, I mean, listen, I know we can't talk about Omar because of all the other stuff, but didn't he at least hit double-digit home runs a few times back when we were when he was known to be like the no power guy in the lineup? It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to see something that low for a team. So yeah, when I saw that, I'm like, that's just a good, there's a good pub trivia question with your buddies you can throw out. How many people have double-digit home runs for the Rays? My other co-host apparently wants to make sure that he gets his time on air. He is here to contribute. Speaking of co-host times on air, why don't we take our first break? I know we said we talk about the game, but we'll talk about the game, and we'll talk a little bit about attendance. And for some people, it's such a hot button. So don't turn off. We're going to talk, the good and the bad of it. It'll be fine. And then after that, part of segment 2 and into segment 3, we are going to get into the wonderful world of what we think this postseason roster is going to shape up and look like. Our sponsor, as I said at the top of the show, is Simply Safe. And here's what I knew about Simply Safe coming in. They advertise on a lot of podcasts I listen to. I have heard many Simply Safe ads. And to me, that's always one of those things that I feel like you can trust a company when you've heard them for years, right? This isn't a fly by night. This isn't somebody by themselves in their garage offering you home protection. This is a company that's been in business for a very long time. Over 4 million customers have chosen to use Simply Safe and their cutting edge technology. Fun fact, the house I bought, the house you see around me, if you looked up, there are some Simply Safe things from the previous owner that were here, still some sensors. And I can tell you, while they were not put in well, they are sturdy equipment because a few have fallen off, not again, due to the hardware, due to the previous owner not being able to use a screwdriver and a hammer. They have fallen, they have stayed intact. It is a solid, steady piece of equipment. It is good equipment. And you should know they have 24/7 professional monitoring. Simply Safe agents call you the moment a threat is detected and dispatch police at the first response of an emergency, even if you're not home or can't be reached. It blankets your home in protection. If you listen to podcasts, you'll hear about the story of a guy who burned his pizza rolls, caught his house on fire, and he fell asleep. He didn't call the police. Simply Safe saved his life by detecting the issue, getting help, and making sure that he awoke. They have monitoring experts who use proprietary advanced response technology to visually confirm when a break-in is real, so you get the highest priority police dispatch. Customize the perfect system for your home in minutes at simplysafe.com. /Locked On MLB. Save 20% on your Simply Safe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplysafe.com /Locked On MLB to learn more. There's no safe like Simply Safe. So let's actually discuss this game that I teed you up for and then completely derailed our entire podcast. So a win 91 for Cleveland, as everyone expected at the start of the year. It felt like, offensively for me, the standouts were Miller, Arias, and Rosario. But, just a solid win, good bullpen. Quantrill got the job done. That's all he does, is he goes out and gets the job done. What were your thoughts and takeaways on this one, getting to see it in person?
Yeah, Quantrill was solid early on. I mean, he just fired strikes. He looked pretty good. He was 95. I'm not sure. I have to go back and see where he was velocity-wise most of the year, but he was looking pretty good early on. He was throwing a lot of strikes and got a couple strikeouts today. What did he end up with? 4 strikeouts in 5 innings. Not a guy that misses a lot of bats, but only 4 hits. Looked fantastic. And then they brought in Plesac and Henches out of the bullpen. Quantrill looks like he's ready to pitch in the postseason. Not that it, this is a quirky thing that doesn't actually matter, but he's undefeated at home in Progressive Field since he's
always
been, right? Yeah, I don't think since he's been traded to Cleveland, he's lost a game at Progressive Field.
I believe that's correct. No, I think you're right.
At least not this year.
No, it goes back to last year as well. I remember talking about that stat. So at least as a starter, he has never lost at home. I can confirm that. And it's interesting, after our discussion yesterday, again, make sure to go listen to yesterday's show if you missed it. I mean, I feel like this basically confirms Plesac to the pen, right?
Yeah, they rolled him out of the pen for 1 inning. He threw 5-6 pitches. What did he end up with? He threw 6 pitches, 5 strikes. Got out of it pretty easily. I would assume Savali starts Wednesday, and they hold him for ALDS game 1, and Plesac goes to the pen as your extra option.
Should we talk about 99? That's got to be one of the weirdest innings I've seen all year. That gets his. Now, listen, people get really mad. 99 is a lightning rod. People feel like I don't respect him enough. I have gotten there's negative iTunes reviews for that. He has been amazing, but I think it's also interesting. We talk about the Trevor Stephan and some of the issues. I mean, you go and you look at 99. That ERA on September 6th was barely over 1. Now, barely over 2 is good. That's where he is now, but he's actually seen a kind of a steady rise over the past, month or so, where he's still awesome, excellent, amazing, but it's not been quite as slammed the door for him as it was at first. At least that was my feeling. And again, it was a weird inning, but.
Yeah, I mean, he had the single, a ball hit back to him, which he fielded just fine. but that got a runner to second base. He threw two wild pitches in a row.
Yeah.
And remember, he also had Bo Naylor catching him for not the first time, because Bo Naylor caught him, I think, when James was rehabbing in AAA after his spring training injury, Naylor might have still been in Akron. I'd have to double check, but
I think he was.
There's a chance that he was in AA still.
I believe so.
Yeah, so this might have been the first time Bo Naylor has ever caught James Karinchak. So that kind of factors in here. Not that the wild pitches were on Naylor, because Karinchak threw the ball, but he still got 2 strikeouts. I guess the only thing you really look at is he was down a half a mile with the fastball again. He was averaging 94, got up to 95. That's a little unusual for him, but didn't get any swings and miss on the curveball. He got 3 swings and miss on the fastball. It's been a weird end of the season for him, but still feel good. He misses bats.
Yeah, no, and Clase, it's interesting because one could argue he doesn't miss that many bats, but he missed 2 in this one. But he's another one. I know people will probably be like, well, you should talk. Stephan, Clase, and 99 have all kind of seen some statistical rising to a degree, just in terms of some stuff. Now, again, I mean, Clase, I think, is still the best reliever in baseball. I'm not gonna. I wonder too in this game, how much of this was like, how much do they still like? I'm not saying that they don't care, and the Class A's was unearned, but like, is there a degree you think when you're facing the Kansas City Royals? And I laugh because the Royals have been really bad, so bad that when I was looking up stats for like who has been the worst hitter in baseball this year in terms of runs created plus, it's Nikki Lopez of the Royals. Like, this is a bad team they're facing. Do you think there's any degree with those 2 guys at the back of the pen just taking their foot off the gas a little here?
I mean, I hope not. I hope that's not the case. I will say, not even the relievers, but just through the first couple innings, the energy did look kind of low. And I started to think about, if they are going to have to flip a switch come Friday, and that's not what you want to do. I think you want to make sure you're, ready to fire on all cylinders right away. I don't know. I think this had weird innings. Like, had a throwing error by Jimenez in the 9th inning. I don't think Clase, did he even allow a ball out of the infield? Okay, he had the single to Pasquantino, and that was it. Everything else was kind of on the infields, and he had 2 strikeouts. So, yeah, if Jimenez doesn't make that error, the game's probably over before that anyway. And he only threw 15 pitches. I'm not too worried about it. I think you just hope that now that today is over, maybe you can get them some rest tomorrow and then rest Thursday, so they have 2 days off before the start of the 3-game series. That's kind of where my head's at right now with them.
And then, I completely had my thought, and then just escaped my head, which can happen. I swear I had a point. But with just kind of the overall, when you're looking at the game like this one, now I remember my point. Sorry, I did find the humor in Quan going 0 for 4 with the strikeout, in Clase giving up a run unearned the day after both were announced for a Rookie of the Month and a Reliever of the Month award. Like, it felt like perfect timing in this game. Again, I know there'll be people saying all the negatives, so let's talk about the positives. Rosario is going to probably, he's got it locked, right? He's going to lead this team in hits. He has had a very Amed Rosario season with the ups and downs. He's the guy who's more than the sum of his parts, though, and definitely means more to the team than probably we can just quantify. Jose's double, I really thought was going out. Owen Miller, were you a little surprised it was only the 6th home run? He's got so many doubles. I thought he'd have more than 6 home runs this year.
I mean, he's had some stretches this year where he's gone homerless for a while, so not surprised. And I also think Jose's ball would have been a home run on a warmer night. Not that that's happening this weekend, but it probably would have been.
And then, with Gabriel, like, he had one of the 2 walks. He had his first major league double. I know he's hitting 191 with a 640 OPS, but looking at the big picture with him, don't you? I think I talked about this yesterday. Maybe it's just me having too much bias, having previously liked the profile. But do you think specifically this time around he seems just more comfortable and we're seeing a better performance? I don't think that's debatable. I mean, the first 2 were so bad that it's just nice to see him look comfortable, even if the defense has been a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, the at bats have been good. I don't think he's had too many bad at bats this stint around, especially as he's playing more. Definitely would like to see him stop trying to throw the ball the way he has. It almost defensively, he almost looks like a quarterback who knows he has this great arm and just wants to fit throws into tight windows, and he keeps making weird throws. You hope he has that out of his system for the playoffs if he's even playing. But no, the at bats have looked really good. I think he's looked much more comfortable the more playing time he gets. He looks more like we expected.
So speaking of postseason, we'll get into that in a second here, but so one of the big dog whistly things to me is discussion of the postseason. And it was heavy today because the Guardians aren't sold out. Now, at the same time, I do want to point out that those seats are nosebleeds that cost you $83, which after Ticketmaster gets their cut and everything else is probably going to cost you $100+ on what is going to be a not necessarily grand weather weekend. And, these are, people will tell me excuses, but I think the bigger story here is like, we're almost 48 hours out from Friday as we're recording this, and no one knows what time that game is. I'm a teacher in my day job. There's such a bad sub shortage. I would feel like a jerk if I skipped a day of work to go to a 1:00 game, which could be Friday's game. And by the way, if I buy a ticket and it turns out to be for a game I can't go to, well, I can't exchange it. The way things work, you're just stuck with that ticket. I think that's part of what's contributing to it. I think there's a lot of factors going on. I know people want to make this just about the name, and yeah, they probably, let's be honest, if there hadn't been a name change, it probably would be sold out because there's like under 500 tickets left. It's not like we're talking that half the stadium's going to be filled. It's like the bad seats left, but there might be about 300 to 400 people who are so mad they're refusing to come, and that might have been enough, but I think it's a little overblown when people are just like, it's all about the name. I think we have about 12 different factors that could be. And yeah, the name was a little divisive, but I don't think it's the main number one thing here. I think a lot of it is who knows what time that game's going to be.
If people really want to argue it's the name, then they've lost kind of the argument already, because the Guardians attendance is up this year from last season, and I'm sure a lot of that has to do with how good the team has been. If the name was an issue, why wouldn't the attendance be down from 2021? And that's also with the fact that, okay, I guess maybe this is the other side of it. It was 2021. Remember, there was like
the COVID at the start of the year.
Yeah. Okay. Still, either way.
But you look at 2021. That was a team. Yes, the Lindor deal had happened, but they still had a lot of. This year was more the rebuild year, in my opinion. Like, maybe I'm wrong, but like looking at this year at the start of the year, like this was a full-on rebuild. They didn't do anything in free agency. Like, I mean, I sat here kind of dreading, like after the Austin Meadows trade happened, like I sat there dreading it because I was like, I'm just gonna have so much vitriol. And listen, I mean, the best move they made was not trading and letting Stephen Kwan play, but we didn't know that at the time. We didn't know about the young players, and we have a weird season. A lot of people with the name, like, we have to be honest, like that did affect some people. I don't think it affected as many as people want to make it out to be, but I think it is a loud vocal group that's unhappy. Then there was the lockout, which cut off another set of fans. And then there was complete inaction. So I'd be curious to see like month by month data. Like, unfortunately, you look at data, it's just like totals. And Cleveland is like, if they're not bottom five, they're just outside of it. But ownership that refuses to spend, all those things combined, I think affect the overall attendance numbers. But I think specifically for this postseason, we're not talking about 1,000 seats available. We're talking about 500 in the 500s in some of the highest seats when we don't know. And yes, Saturday we don't know either. But Saturday's going to sell out. Like it's a little bit slower, but it's going to get there. It has much better data. Friday's just hard. Again, like I said, as a teacher, I would go to these games if I still lived in Cleveland, except for I wouldn't go to Fridays because I can't leave my kids in the lurch. And there are people who have jobs who can't get out. I know there are people out there like, oh, skip work. Not every job can you do that for. And I think there's a little bit of disingenuousness that people want to make this point A, B, or C. Let's be honest. There are many reasons that people have been mad, And yes, the name change is one, the money is one, the lockout is one. We have about 15 factors that are limiting. And I think right now, once they finally announce when this game is going to be, if it's not a 1 o'clock game, I guarantee it sells out.
If it makes you feel any better, anybody any better, Saturday has less tickets available than Friday, which tells you,
Yeah.
About people's schedules and availability for this. And also, not that I want to, off the rails here. You said the Guardians did nothing in free agency, and we just spent a segment yesterday talking about the benefits of Brian Shaw. So you just reversed everything we talked about yesterday. Way to go.
And Yale really worked out as well. Like, I mean, he was literally the only player they added before the lockout. That was it. And I think I devoted if I'm gonna pat myself on the back for the Meadows trade, I devoted maybe 60 seconds to him after he was signed, because I mean I didn't have expectations. But when you talk about, like, we talked about kind of off mic about the idea of what this team does well and their advantages, and we're not going to get into too much today. One of the other hot button things was this idea of, would it have been better for the Guardians to have done a full rebuild at one point? And we're going to save that as a discussion for later. But one of those things is, like, this team has always done a superb job of knowing what teams don't do things well, right? Like, they went out and added all that pitching from San Diego because San Diego was a black hole of pitching development. Adding Trevor Stephan from the Yankees, look at the Yankees' history of pitching development before Matt Blake. Look what Matt Blake has done with Nestor Cortez. Like, and remember, Matt Blake came from Cleveland. Look at Philly's pitching development. Look at Philly's prospect development. Yeah, they're in the postseason, but they bottomed out for a few years there and have almost nothing to show from bottoming out.
The one thing they don't do well is trade with the Rays. That's the one area they struggle with, is making trade with Tampa Bay. That's everything else they've kind of got figured out.
No, they
trade with the Rays.
But which is, I mean, pretty much everyone. That's the uniform rule, right? Like the Rays seem to just black magic everyone. But yeah, I think, I feel like, I guess I just get annoyed with this attendance thing, because it feels like I said, very dog whistly. It's people who have a narrative point of view they want to push. And I think the bigger issue is, like, the one consistent issue I've had all year, which is MLB, get your act together. Like, you can't market your stars. You can't figure out how to make this fun. When it's like, I go and watch, like, with last year when the Korean baseball championship happened, and they gave, like, a giant, like, video game-esque sword, and people are running around the field with it. Like, do something big and entertaining. Stop making it so bat flips get balls thrown at people's heads, and maybe give fans more than 48 hours notice of when a playoff game is going to happen. Because, like, that's ridiculous. Like, you shouldn't be mad at anyone other than Major League Baseball right now, because they're hosing their fans. Like, that is, to me, the view. Like, you giving this little notice is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, with everything coming down to the last, I guess not the last day, everything's clinched as of now. But with everything coming down to the last possible moment, the day before, I don't know what else you can really do.
I mean, if you just kind of know, like, it's going to be Cleveland's going to host and Toronto's going to host. Like, who cares beyond that? Like, just set a date and time and move on. Like, if you're going to give one a day game, give the day game. Like, I just think you have to sometimes not put people in the lurch. We are running low on time. Let's take a break here. End our discussion with this, come back and talk some postseason hitting on today's Locked On Guardians. Okay, let's get into hitters. So let's just talk about, like, do you want to start with the starters, or do you want to start with the bench crew? We said 14 is probably going to be the number, right?
Yeah, that's what it sounded like their day, was the balance would be 14 hitters and 12 pitchers. The starters, I think, are pretty much set in stone. It's just going to depend on how they decide to platoon.
So let's see. Should we catcher?
Well, Bo Naylor and Luke Maile are on the bench. That's, I think, we're not. I guess we shouldn't say we're sure it's going to be Bo Naylor, but I think all signs are pointing that way.
Yeah, it does seem like they're going to take 3, and then even if we don't see Naylor as like I wouldn't be shocked, let's put it this way, if Naylor is mostly used in the Ernie Clement ceremonial pinch runner rule, because one of the things Tito talked about with Naylor, I felt like when he came up, was specifically his ability to run. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing him used more in that role, just because Yeah, we know Tito loves his grizzled vets and specifically behind the mound. And I wonder if any part of today with those wild pitches, which again are not on the catcher, but if that's going to stick in Tito's mind at all. I wonder if I wonder if we're going to actually, do you think we'll see Naylor start a game?
In the postseason?
Yeah.
No, I don't think even Luke Bailey will start a game. I think
No.
every game will be, unless it's like I guess if they play a night game and the next day there's no day off in a day game, I suppose they might start Maley the next day, but that's about the only thing I could think of.
No, it certainly feels, I agree. The Naylor is there as kind of an emergency catcher / pitch runner. And like I said, it's weird to say your third string catcher is a pitch runner, but I think they might consider him in that role late in games. Moving to first base, do we think this is just Naylor all day, every day? Do we think it's going to be that Naylor Miller platoon? How do you think this one plays out?
Yeah, like I said the other day, I just have a feeling we saw it tonight. I had to look at the lineups for the whole weekend, but I think Tampa or Kansas City just threw 3 left-handers in this series. They had Chris Bubich and Daniel Lynch. Who was the other left-hander? Was there a third starter? And that's no, because they had Greinke and I forget who else. Either way,
Greinke and Singer, right?
Yeah, those guys are all righties. Okay, so just Lynch and Bubich, but Miller started at first base in both those games, so I would almost be.
He had a home run off the lefty tonight. This just to give him his due. He did hit the home run off the lefty, so that probably seals it. Listen, neither of them are good versus lefties. Let's just be honest. Naylor probably needs a real platoon buddy. And I was kind of curious because I talked about Nikki Lopez as a 56 runs created plus. That's the worst in baseball with a minimum 400 plate appearances. Tied for 24th worst, Owen Miller. I think that's where he is. He's been bottom 25 in all of baseball. Now, there's some names on that list. Jared Walsh was someone I was a fan of this offseason. Robbie Grossman, Cody Bellinger down there again. No rebound for him this year. Trent Grisham, Franmil Reyes. Miles Straw is still 5th from the bottom, even with his improvements. But yeah, it's Tampa also has one. Taylor Walls is 6th. So Taylor Walls is their Miles Straw. But yeah, it's a weird list. But yeah, I would love to see some form of improvement. Personally, I think you and I both agree we'd rather see Brennan out there with a Gonzalez DH on those days with Naylor at first and Miller just out of the lineup. I don't think we see it, but could be. So second base, do we even need to talk about second and third and short, or should we just move on?
No, I think the only thing up in the air is whether or not Naylor will officially be on the roster and will Owen Miller start against left-handers. That's the only thing I think up in the air. Otherwise, you're set. Will Brennan's going to be in right field against righties, and Oscar will DH, and the lineup will be the lineup. I think everything's set in stone. Maybe
do you think
Benson's spot?
So do you think against righties we will see that they will kind of stick with what we've recently seen? And then I guess
I can't imagine they would deviate now.
Okay. And if you were running things, would you just have Brennan every day as the right fielder and Oscar every day DH and Naylor every day first baseman?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for wins on the fringes, I think so, because Brennan's the better defender. He's a better base runner than Owen Miller. All the things that they need to do to win the series is run the bases, and they need to play good defense. And that's what Brennan gives you in the lineup. Owen Miller doesn't give you any of those things, even, platoon or not.
No, I mean, I agree. Maybe it makes the podcast not as fun. Maybe I should sit here being like, no, you need to stick with your your right-handed bat against lefties because magic. Because obviously the numbers don't speak to that. So your only answer is magic, honestly. It does feel like, I guess we Stephen Kwan, Miles Straw, we've basically gone through it. So if we assume, the typical 10 starters, that's not right. Is it 9 starters? It was a rough day at work. I'm just going to put it that way. Had some there. I'm not going to not say I got smacked today, but we'll just leave it there. We assume 2 catchers. So that gets us up to 11 players. So who are our final? Owen Miller, we've already discussed. So I'm just trying to think. So if we count Owen Miller / Will Brennan is essentially one because the way the DH plays out. So one bench spot between two guys because one of them's also a starter. Does that make sense? Like if we assume if we assume Brennan's a starter, then Miller's the bench bat. If we assume Miller's a starter, bench bat. So that gets us up to 12. So those final two, are we thinking it's just who's with the team right now? Is it Gabriel and is it Bo?
Yeah, and Will Benson, I think will
And
be
Will
there
Benson.
too, because that'll be your extra outfielder / pinch runner.
Okay, so that did I do?
They have 14 position players right now. I think.
Now.
Yeah, you have they'll drop Savali and they'll drop McCarty for the postseason roster, and that'll get you down to 26. That would be
so there we go.
My guess.
So they're just gonna. You think they're gonna run with what they have, and yeah,
unless Gabriel Arias' like wild throws the last couple of days scared them enough to bring Tyler Freeman back, I don't think so. I think in a pinch, and like I said yesterday, if Gabriel Arias is playing if he's playing in any game then in the postseason, that probably means something didn't go good or someone's hurt. But he at least can offer you emergency at first base and emergency in the outfield if you absolutely need it. Whereas you don't have that from Freeman, and if you feel like Arias is the better defender despite his throwing issues.
There have been two players to play every single game in the last 7 days, and it's Gabriel and Oscar. So, I mean, I feel like the fact they're trying to get him that many reps is kind of interesting, at least from the perspective of like, it certainly seems like they're trying to ramp him up to play. And, he's played every single spot in the infield in the last week. So it's like they're trying to make him the super utility going forward.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's at first base on Wednesday.
Nor would I.
Yeah.
Because that was, when Will Benson got caught up, there was some thought that, he had spent some time at first and maybe he could eventually be in that role. But I mean, he's essentially, let's be honest, Benson is super defense and pinch run. And I would be kind of surprised if he gets an at bat in the postseason.
Yeah, not unless they're up big or down big.
Yeah.
And if you're down big, you still don't do that. So I think they have to be up big for him to do that.
Yeah. No, it's certainly going to be interesting to watch. We'll have, our shows as usual. Tomorrow we will finish off the season. It's weird to say that. Normally it's like, oh, the season's done, but it's kind of a fun position just in terms of postseason right around the corner. So we will be ready to reload, lock in, and go from there. I've been Jeff Ellis on behalf of my co-host Justin Lotto, and I thank you all for listening, rating and reviewing, downloading daily. It helps. We're at 693 subscribers on YouTube. So if you've not subscribed, please go subscribe. Getting us to 1,000 would be huge, 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 huge. Let's make it a postseason gift for this free show. Go subscribe if you have not. And how I've ended every show and will continue to end, go Guardians, go.